Some children don't vanish on city streets or in dark alleyways. They disappear inside their own homes behind locked doors, while the world outside continues as if nothing is wrong. Jacqueline Mimi Torres-Garcia was one of those children. She wasn't kidnapped by a stranger. She wasn't lost in a crowd. She was starved, restrained, and left to die slowly, while the adults around her chose silence over action. If you want to follow this case and other investigative stories that demand justice and accountability, please subscribe to our channel and join us in shedding light on cases that society must never forget. Jacqueline Torres-Garcia, known affectionately to those who knew her as Mimi, was an 11-year-old girl living in Connecticut with her mother and her mother's boyfriend. On the surface, nothing about her family situation raised immediate red flags to neighbors or casual observers. There were no prior reports of abuse, no police calls to the residence, and no obvious signs of dysfunction visible from the outside. Mimi was by all appearances just another child navigating the complexities of a blended family household. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, a nightmare was unfolding. Mimi attended school regularly until she didn't. At some point during the year leading up to fall 2024, Mimi stopped showing up to her classes. Her absence, however, did not trigger the alarm bells it should have. When school administrators inquired about her whereabouts, they were given an explanation that seemed plausible enough on its surface. Mimi's mother, Carla Rosalie Garcia, 29 years old at the time, informed the school that her daughter had either moved away to live with other relatives or was being homeschooled. In the United States, homeschooling is a legal educational option, and families who choose this path are not subject to the same level of oversight as children attending public or private institutions. This created the first critical gap in Mimi's safety net. Once Mimi was removed from the school system under the guise of homeschooling or relocation, she effectively vanished from public view. There were no teachers checking on her progress, no classmates wondering where she had gone, and no mandatory health screenings or welfare checks. The family moved residences at least once during this period, further complicating any potential trail. Mimi became invisible to the systems designed to protect children like her, and in that invisibility, she suffered unimaginable torment. According to court documents and statements made by investigators following the discovery of her remains, Mimi endured weeks, possibly months of systematic abuse and neglect. She was allegedly subjected to prolonged starvation, deprived of adequate food and water, while confined within the home. Investigative records indicate that she was restrained using zip ties, a detail that speaks to the deliberate and conscious nature of her suffering. She was reportedly kept in isolation, confined to a specific area of the residence, denied medical care, and left to deteriorate physically and psychologically. This was not a case of accidental neglect or a momentary lapse in judgment. The evidence suggests a sustained pattern of cruelty that continued until Mimi's young body could endure no more. Mimi died sometime in the fall of 2024. The exact date of her death has not been publicly disclosed, but what happened afterward is perhaps equally disturbing. Rather than reporting her death to authorities seeking emergency medical assistance or providing her with a dignified burial, those responsible for her care allegedly chose concealment. According to law enforcement officials, Mimi's body was placed inside a large plastic storage container. This container, containing the remains of a child who had once laughed, played, and dreamed of a future, was kept inside the residence for a period of time. Later, when the family relocated, the container was moved with them, transported to a new location, as if it were just another piece of household cargo. For nearly a year, Mimi's absence went unreported to police. No missing person report was filed. No Amber Alert was issued. The child who had once been part of a community, who had sat in classrooms and walked neighborhood streets, was gone, and the silence surrounding her disappearance was absolute. But silence, no matter how carefully maintained, is rarely permanent. As months passed, questions began to emerge from extended family members and acquaintances. People who had known Mimi or had been in contact with the family started to notice inconsistencies in the stories they were told about her whereabouts. Some relatives reportedly expressed concern that they had not seen or heard from Mimi in an unusually long time. The explanations provided by Torres-Garcia and those living with her began to contradict each other or evolve in ways that raised suspicion. These concerns eventually reached law enforcement, and an investigation was initiated. Detectives with the Connecticut State Police began interviewing individuals connected to the household where Mimi had last been seen. As investigators applied pressure and scrutinized the timeline of events, cracks appeared in the facade that had been maintained for so long. On October 8, 2025, a breakthrough occurred. One of the individuals involved in the case provided information that led investigators to a specific location. Police were directed to a property on Clark Street, to an area behind an abandoned residence that had likely seen better days. There, officers made the grim discovery they had been dreading. Inside a plastic storage container, they found human remains in an advanced state of decomposition. Forensic examination would later confirm what investigators already suspected: these were the remains of Jacqueline Mimi Torres-Garcia. The discovery of Mimi's body marked the beginning of the legal proceedings against those accused of her death and the subsequent cover-up. Carla Rosalie Garcia, Mimi's mother, was arrested and charged with murder, risk of injury to a child resulting in death, and concealment of a corpse. The charges reflected the severity of the allegations against her, painting a picture of a parent who not only failed to protect her child, but allegedly participated in her suffering and death. Jonathan Abel Nanita, 30 years old and identified as Carla Garcia's boyfriend, was also taken into custody. He faced charges that included complicity in the crime's concealment of evidence and hindering prosecution. The allegations suggested that he was present during Mimi's abuse, aware of her condition, and participated in the effort to hide her body after her death. A third individual, Jacqueline Leanne Garcia, 28 years old and identified as a relative of Mimi, was charged as well. Described as either a sister or cousin to Carla Garcia, which would make her Mimi's aunt or extended family member, Jacqueline allegedly knew about the abuse occurring in the home but failed to report it to authorities. She faces charges related to her failure to intervene or notify Child Protective Services or law enforcement about the endangered child living under the same roof or in close proximity. The arrest sent shockwaves through the Connecticut community and beyond. How could a child suffer and die in such a manner without anyone intervening? The case highlighted painful gaps in the child welfare system, particularly regarding children who are homeschooled or frequently moved between residences. Unlike children enrolled in traditional schools, who are seen daily by teachers and staff trained to recognize signs of abuse, homeschooled children can fall through the cracks if their families are not monitored appropriately. There are thousands of children across America being educated at home by loving, dedicated parents. But the lack of mandatory check-ins or welfare visits means that children like Mimi can be hidden away when abuse occurs. Public outrage was swift and intense. Community members demanded answers about how such a tragedy could unfold undetected. Child advocacy organizations called for reforms to homeschooling oversight laws, arguing that while parental rights to educate their children at home should be respected, there must also be safeguards to ensure that this option is not exploited by those seeking to isolate and harm children. The case became a rallying point for those pushing for mandatory periodic welfare checks, annual medical examinations, or standardized academic assessments for all homeschooled children. As the legal process moves forward, the three defendants face serious criminal charges. As of the writing of this account, they have been arrested and are awaiting trial. Under the American legal system, they are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. The evidence will be presented before a judge and potentially a jury, and only through that process will official determinations of guilt or innocence be made. It is important to note that charges are allegations, and the final verdict will rest with the justice system. The loss of Jacqueline. Mimi Torres-Garcia represents more than just a single tragedy. It is a stark reminder of the vulnerability of children who live outside the view of mandatory reporters and oversight systems. Mimi's death raises profound questions about societal responsibility. How many other children might be suffering in silence, hidden behind explanations of homeschooling or relocation? What mechanisms can be put in place to ensure that every child, regardless of their educational setting or family structure, has regular contact with individuals outside their immediate household who can assess their well-being? Mimi's story is a call to vigilance. It challenges us to look beyond surface-level explanations and to question situations that don't feel right, even when we lack concrete proof of wrongdoing. It reminds us that child abuse often occurs not because nobody could have known, but because those who suspected something chose not to act, either out of fear, uncertainty, or a misplaced belief that it wasn't their place to intervene. The investigation into Mimi's death continues as prosecutors build their case and prepare for trial. The community that failed to see her suffering while she was alive now bears witness to the aftermath of that failure. Vigils have been held in her memory, candles lit for a little girl whose light was extinguished far too soon. Social media has been flooded with tributes and calls for justice, with many using the hashtag of her name to ensure that her story is not forgotten. For those who knew Mimi personally, the grief is compounded by guilt. Friends and extended family members are left wondering if there were signs they missed, moments when they could have asked more questions or insisted on seeing her. Even those who never met her feel the weight of her loss, recognizing that she represents countless other children who suffer in silence, waiting for someone to notice, someone to care, someone to save them. The legal proceedings against Carla Garcia, Jonathan Nanita, and Jacqueline Garcia will unfold in the coming months and potentially years. If convicted, they face significant prison sentences. Murder charges, particularly those involving the death of a child, carry some of the harshest penalties under Connecticut law. The concealment charges add additional years to potential sentences, and the risk of injury to a child resulting in death is treated with the utmost severity by the courts. But no amount of prison time can undo what happened to Mimi. No verdict can bring her back or give her the childhood she deserved. Justice in cases like these is an imperfect remedy for an irreversible harm. The best that can be hoped for is accountability, a public acknowledgement of what went wrong, and meaningful changes to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Mimi's case is a powerful reminder that community vigilance saves lives. Many hesitate to report abuse, fearing they might be wrong. But Child Protective Services investigate discreetly. A phone call triggers assessment, not automatic removal. In Mimi's case, one call might have saved her. Educational institutions, healthcare providers, neighbors, and family members form a child's safety net. Mimi fell through every layer, and the result was devastating. Jacqueline Mimi Torres-Garcia was more than her tragic death. She was a child with dreams and dignity. The haunting truth: she didn't die at a stranger's hands. She died where she should have been safe, by those meant to protect her. She suffered for months while life continued normally beyond the walls confining her. For nearly a year, the world didn't know she was gone. That is this case's true horror. Justice here means more than punishment. It demands prevention and protection. A society valuing children must ensure no child vanishes without consequence, that every child has advocates beyond family, and that protective systems are empowered to act on warning signs. Share your thoughts on reforms needed to prevent similar tragedies. Subscribe to our channel for updates on this case and others demanding our attention. Together, through awareness and advocacy, we can build a world where no child suffers invisible and alone. Mimi's memory demands our lasting commitment to speak up when something seems wrong, and to build a society where every child is seen, valued, and protected. Only then do we truly honor her and the painful lesson her death taught us.